Here's the two before you even get out of bed this morning. The fat you can pinch on your stomach might be the least of your problems. There's another kind of fat hiding deeper, wrapped around your liver, your intestines, your pancreas, and it's quietly rewriting your risk for heart disease, diabetes, and even certain cancers. And the scary part? You can look relatively slim and still have dangerously high levels of it. So how do you actually get rid of this stuff? And how fast can your body really shrink it? Stick with me for the next few minutes because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what the science says works, what's a waste of your time, and what you can start doing today. Let's start with the basics because most people have never had this explained clearly. Fat in your body isn't all the same. There's subcutaneous fat, which is the fat right under your skin, the stuff you can grab with your fingers on your arms, thighs, or belly. Annoying, sure, but relatively low risk. Then there's visceral fat, and this is the one we need to talk about. Visceral fat sits deep in your abdominal cavity, packed around your organs like your liver, pancreas, and intestines. Think of it less like padding and more like an active organ itself. It pumps out hormones and inflammatory chemicals directly into your bloodstream. It's metabolically active, which sounds harmless, but in this case, that's exactly the problem. This fat isn't just sitting there. It's talking to the rest of your body, and often it's saying things your body really doesn't want to hear. So why does this matter so much? Here's where the science gets serious. Research published in journals like Circulation and the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology has linked higher visceral fat levels to increased insulin resistance, meaning your cells stop responding properly to insulin, which sets the stage for type 2 diabetes. Visceral fat has also been associated with elevated levels of inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, which researchers connect to higher cardiovascular risk. And here's the part that surprises most people. Studies using imaging techniques like MRI and CT scans have shown that someone can have a completely normal body weight and still carry dangerously high visceral fat. This is sometimes called being skinny fat, and it explains why some slim-looking people develop diabetes or heart disease, while some heavier people with more subcutaneous fat and less visceral fat stay metabolically healthy. Your scale doesn't tell this story. Your waistline actually tells you more than your weight does, which is exactly why doctors now use waist circumference as a key screening tool alongside BMI. Now, before we get into what actually works, let's talk about what doesn't, because this is where most people waste months, sometimes years. Mistake number 1, spot reduction. Have you ever done 100 crunches a day hoping your belly would shrink first? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your body doesn't let you choose where fat comes off. Ab exercises build muscle underneath the fat. They don't melt the fat itself. Mistake number 2. Extreme, unsustainable diets. Cutting your calories drastically might show fast results on the scale, but a lot of that early weight is water and muscle, not visceral fat. And the moment you go back to normal eating, it often comes right back, sometimes worse. Mistake number 3, obsessing over cardio alone while ignoring strength training. And mistake number 4, the one nobody talks about enough, ignoring sleep and stress completely, as if visceral fat only responds to food and exercise. It doesn't. Your hormones play a massive role here, and we'll get into exactly why in a moment. So what does actually move the needle? Let's go through the evidence-based methods one at a time, starting with the single most important lever you have: your diet. First, let's talk about calorie balance because this is the foundation everything else sits on. Your body doesn't burn fat, visceral or otherwise, unless it's in a calorie deficit, meaning you're consistently using more energy than you're taking in. This isn't about starving yourself. In fact, research consistently shows that moderate deficits, somewhere around 500 calories a day below what you burn, lead to more sustainable fat loss than aggressive crash diets. Why does moderate work better long term? Because your body doesn't panic and slow down your metabolism as dramatically, and you're far more likely to actually stick with it for months instead of days. And here's something interesting studies have found. Visceral fat tends to respond faster to a calorie deficit than subcutaneous fat does. In several clinical trials looking at weight loss interventions, participants lost visceral fat at a proportionally higher rate compared to fat elsewhere on the body. In plain English, this deep, dangerous fat is often one of the first things your body lets go of when you're in a genuine deficit. That's actually encouraging news, isn't it? Now let's talk about protein, because this might be the most underrated tool in the entire fat loss conversation. High protein intake does two things at once. First, it keeps you full for longer, which naturally reduces how much you eat without you having to white-knuckle your way through hunger. Second, and this is crucial, protein protects your muscle mass while you're losing fat. Why does that matter for visceral fat specifically? Because muscle is metabolically active tissue. The more muscle you preserve, the higher your resting metabolic rate stays, which means your body keeps burning more energy even when you're just sitting on the couch. Research published in nutrition journals has shown that higher protein diets, generally in the range of 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, lead to greater fat loss and better preservation of lean muscle compared to lower protein approaches. Good sources include eggs, chicken, fish, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, beans, and lentils. You don't need exotic supplements. You need consistency at meals you're already eating. Next, let's talk about fiber, because this one quietly does more than most people realize. Soluble fiber found in foods like oats, beans, lentils, apples, and flax seeds has been directly studied in relation to visceral fat. One well-known study tracked adults over 5 years and found that for every 10 grams of soluble fiber consumed daily, participants had a measurably smaller increase in visceral fat over time compared to those eating less fiber. How does fiber pull this off? It slows digestion, which helps control blood sugar spikes and keeps insulin levels steadier. It also feeds the beneficial bacteria in your gut, and emerging research suggests a healthier gut microbiome is linked to better metabolic health and lower inflammation. Simply put, fiber is one of the cheapest, most accessible tools you have, and most people aren't even getting close to the recommended 25 to 30 grams a day. Let's shift to something almost everyone underestimates: sugary drinks. If there's one single dietary change that has some of the strongest evidence behind it for visceral fat specifically, it's cutting liquid sugar. Sodas, sweetened juices, energy drinks, and sweetened coffee drinks are loaded with fructose, and multiple studies have shown that fructose, particularly from beverages, is preferentially stored as visceral fat rather than fat elsewhere in the body. Why would your body do that? Researchers believe it has to do with how fructose is processed directly by the liver, which sits right in that visceral fat neighborhood. One frequently cited study found that people who regularly consumed sugar-sweetened beverages had significantly more visceral fat accumulation over time compared to those who didn't, even when total calorie intake was similar. Think about that for a second. It's not just about how many calories you're drinking. It's about where those calories seem to prefer to end up. Now let's move into exercise, because diet alone isn't the whole picture. Let's start with something almost embarrassingly simple: walking. You might be thinking, walking? Really? But here's what the research actually shows. Regular brisk walking, especially when it adds up to around 150 to 300 minutes a week, has been shown in multiple studies to meaningfully reduce visceral fat, even without major dietary changes. One study on middle-aged adults found that consistent walking led to measurable reductions in visceral fat over just a few months. Why does something so low intensity work so well? Because it's sustainable. People actually do it day after day, and consistency beats intensity when it comes to long-term fat loss. Walking after meals in particular has been shown to help blunt blood sugar spikes, which over time supports better insulin sensitivity, one of the exact mechanisms tied to visceral fat reduction. But walking alone isn't the complete strategy. Let's talk about resistance training, because this is where a lot of people, especially those focused only on cardio, are leaving results on the table. Lifting weights or doing body weight resistance exercises like squats, push-ups, and rows builds and preserves muscle mass. And remember what we said earlier about muscle being metabolically active tissue? Studies comparing cardio-only groups to groups combining cardio with resistance training have found that the combination leads to greater reductions in visceral fat specifically, not just overall weight. Some research even suggests that resistance training improves insulin sensitivity independently, meaning it's directly addressing one of the core problems visceral fat creates, not just burning calories during the workout itself. Aim for at least 2 to 3 resistance sessions a week, hitting the major muscle groups. You don't need to become a bodybuilder. You need your muscles working against resistance regularly. Now here's where things get really interesting, because we're moving away from food and exercise into two areas that shockingly few people connect to visceral fat: sleep and stress. Let's talk about sleep first. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to do everything right with diet and exercise but still can't shake stubborn belly fat? Sleep might be the missing piece. Multiple studies have found a direct relationship between short sleep duration, generally under 6 hours a night, and increased visceral fat accumulation. One well-known study followed adults over several years and found that those sleeping 5 hours or less had significantly greater increases in visceral fat compared to those sleeping 7 to 8 hours, even after accounting for diet and activity levels. Why would sleep matter this much? Poor sleep disrupts your hormones, specifically increasing ghrelin, the hormone that makes you feel hungry, while decreasing leptin, the hormone that tells you you're full. On top of that, inadequate sleep raises cortisol levels, and chronically elevated cortisol has been specifically linked to increased fat storage around your organs. This brings us directly to stress. Chronic stress isn't just a mental health issue, it's a physical one, and visceral fat sits right at the intersection. When you're stressed, your body releases cortisol as part of your natural fight or flight response. That's normal and healthy in short bursts. The problem is chronic, ongoing stress, the kind so many of us live with constantly from work, finances, relationships, and just the pace of modern life. Research has shown that visceral fat cells actually have more cortisol receptors than fat cells elsewhere in the body, meaning this deep abdominal fat is particularly sensitive to stress hormones. Studies looking at chronic stress and body composition have found associations between prolonged elevated cortisol and increased visceral fat storage, independent of diet. So managing stress isn't a soft, optional wellness tip. It's a legitimate, evidence-supported strategy for reducing this specific type of fat. Simple practices like daily walks outdoors, deep breathing exercises, limiting doom scrolling before bed, and even short meditation sessions have been shown in various studies to lower cortisol levels over time. Now let's clear up some myths, because there's a lot of misinformation floating around, and separating fact from fiction here can save you months of wasted effort. Myth number 1, you can target belly fat with specific exercises. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth repeating clearly. Doing endless crunches or ab workouts will strengthen your core muscles, which is genuinely valuable, but it will not selectively burn the fat covering those muscles. Fat loss happens throughout the body based on genetics, hormones, and overall energy balance, not based on which muscle you're working. Myth number 2, fat-burning supplements and detox teas will melt visceral fat away. There is currently no strong, credible scientific evidence supporting these products for meaningful visceral fat reduction. Most rely on mild diuretic or laxative effects, which might temporarily reduce bloating, but do nothing to the fat around your organs. Save your money. Myth number 3, All fat is created equal, and being overweight always equals unhealthy, while being thin always equals healthy. As we discussed earlier, someone can be within a normal weight range and still carry dangerous visceral fat levels, while someone with a higher overall weight might have relatively low visceral fat and better metabolic markers. Weight alone is an incomplete picture. Myth number 4. Fasting is magic, and skipping meals is inherently superior for fat loss. Intermittent fasting can be a useful tool for some people because it may naturally help reduce overall calorie intake, but the research doesn't show it's inherently superior to any other approach that achieves the same calorie deficit. The timing matters less than most people think. Total intake, food quality, and consistency matter more. Myth number 5. You need to eliminate entire food groups like carbs completely. There's no strong evidence that low-carb diets specifically outperform other balanced approaches for visceral fat reduction when calories and protein are matched. What matters more is reducing refined sugars and highly processed carbohydrates, not eliminating carbohydrates as a whole category, since whole grains, fruits, and vegetables come with fiber and nutrients your body genuinely needs. So let's bring this all together into something you can actually use. What would a realistic 30-day action plan look like based on everything we just covered? In the first week, focus on awareness. Start tracking what you're currently eating and drinking, particularly noticing how many sugary drinks or snacks sneak into your day without you really registering them. Start adding a 15 to 20-minute walk after your largest meal of the day. This alone begins improving blood sugar response. In week 2, start layering in protein at each meal. This doesn't need to be complicated. Add eggs to breakfast, a palm-sized portion of chicken, fish, or legumes at lunch and dinner. Alongside this, begin swapping at least one sugary drink a day for water, sparkling water, or unsweetened tea. Small, sustainable swaps beat dramatic overnight overhauls every single time. In week 3, introduce resistance training 2 to 3 times a week if you haven't already. This can be as simple as body weight squats, push-ups, and rows at home, or a structured gym routine if you have access to one. Continue your walks, aiming to extend toward that 150 to 300-minute weekly range we talked about. Also, start paying attention to your fiber intake, adding beans, oats, or vegetables to at least 2 meals a day. In week 4, focus on sleep and stress. Set a consistent bedtime that allows for 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and create a simple wind-down routine, dimming lights, putting your phone away earlier, maybe reading instead of scrolling. Add in 5 to 10 minutes of deliberate stress management, whether that's deep breathing, a short walk outside, or quiet time away from screens. By combining consistent movement, adequate protein and fiber, a genuine calorie deficit, and improved sleep and stress management, you're addressing this from every angle the science actually supports, not just one. Now, I want to be honest with you because you deserve honesty, not hype. There's no single food, supplement, or 7-day fix that will dramatically shrink visceral fat overnight. Anyone promising that is not being straight with you. What the research actually shows is that consistent, moderate changes across diet, movement, sleep, and stress management lead to measurable, meaningful reductions in visceral fat over weeks and months. And importantly, these are the kinds of changes you can actually sustain, which is really the whole point. Fast doesn't mean magic. Fast means efficient, doing the things that are proven to work instead of wasting time and energy on things that aren't. So here's the real question. Out of everything we covered today, which one habit are you going to start with this week? Is it swapping out that afternoon soda? Adding a short walk after dinner? Finally prioritizing your sleep? Whatever it is, pick one, start there, and build from it. Your body has an incredible ability to adapt when you give it consistent, evidence-based inputs. And shrinking visceral fat, while it takes time, is absolutely within your control. If this video helped you understand what's actually going on beneath the surface and gave you a real plan instead of empty promises, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this information reach more people who need to hear it. Subscribe if you want more science-backed, no-nonsense health breakdowns like this one, and drop a comment letting me know which habit you're starting with this week. week. I read every single one, and I'd love to know where you're beginning. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.